children's books are such wonderful gateways to have some of those
Yes,
conversations where we don't know as parents, how do I bring this up? Or how do we start talking about this? Or how do I even know how my child is thinking about this or processing this? And sometimes books can be such a wonderful way to see how are they thinking? What are they saying? What are the comments that they're
true.
making when you go through a book?
Hmm.
And so
Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go.
welcome to another episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode with Miriam. She is a mom of a neurodivergent little one, and she ended up on this journey realizing that there wasn't enough affirming children's books on this. And so she wrote her own children's book, and it is such a beautiful illustration of her son Joe's sensory processing differences. I'm so excited to have her here today to talk about her journey and her experiences. Thank you so much for joining us, Miriam.
Thank you, Victoria, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your family's journey and what that looked like in figuring out something was going on. You needed more supports. Joe was having a little bit more difficulty with things, and how that journey unfolded for you guys.
Yeah, Joe is my middle child. I had already had my daughter. She was 2 years old when he was born. And actually, right from the beginning, knew he was different. He was just calm, very calm boy, and would let me, and would let me do my things, like as a mom, my errands and things like that. He wouldn't cry too much. Difficulty drinking his milk. So there were little telltale signs there up until the age of 1. These are the kind of things I noticed. And another thing, major thing I noticed sensory wise, would easily startle when his sister, who was 2 at the time, she's 2-year-old toddler too, but she would treat him as like a doll as well, but would easily startle to her and to noises around the room as well. He would also really fixate on the lights in the room. This was like before he was 1. And then we also noticed, obviously, the speech delay. He was saying like maybe a few words by the time he was 1. And then from then, between the age of 1 and 2 is when we noticed more things. He started walking independently. He was very cautious when it came to walking. He didn't actually start walking until 15 months, but he didn't fall. I think he was waiting for it to be perfect. But we did notice he was playing by himself more and doing kind of the same repetitive way of playing with the cars. And again, continuing with the startling kind of went down, but really fixated on the lights. And then some sounds, we started seeing sensitivity to sounds. So the vacuum, the blender. So that's when we were suspicious, maybe he may be autistic. And so we had an idea before we went for his 2-year checkup. But I have to say, his pediatrician was really on top of it. So we're very happy with the way she also was being on the side of we should just look into this, get a developmental assessment. So we were happy with that. We did notice some reduced pointing, eye contact, also one of those kind of few traits we noticed early on. But then after, and he did respond to his name, but the eye contact thing was more to strangers, people he didn't know. He wasn't so comfortable. So anyway, yeah, we did the developmental assessment when he was 2. We started speech therapy straight away before he got the official diagnosis. And then we had regional center involved, and they came out. Wasn't very happy with that assessment. It was very invasive. 2 hours, we don't know, like he doesn't know them. They were expecting him to do certain things. I was upset. It was very negative base, like red flags everywhere, like negative base type thing. And I told them, he can do this. He can go up the stairs. He can do this. And have you seen him do this kind of thing? And they were like, okay, yeah, but these things he cannot do. And so that's when we started ABA, which is usually what parents will find will be the first line treatment. They like to call it for autism. So we started ABA 3 times a week, which isn't actually as bad as many parents I know say they start like 5 times a week. Yeah, and we were happy with that at the time. And we did speech therapy through our insurance once a week. And then he was 3, we got the official diagnosis. The psychiatrist was great. And we got that official diagnosis. We had to switch our ABA vendors because of the insurance. And then the same thing happened. Now I know, which I didn't know before, but a lot of compliance-based interventions during the therapy in ABA.
Mm-hmm.
And even for speech, there was not much progress after maybe like a year or 2 through our insurance. And then she told us, I'm going to discharge him. He can just continue with the school speech therapist. And I was like, this is not, why are you discharging him? It's not. I think at that time, what happened was because it was COVID, they had a huge waiting list as well. So there was younger children. Anyway, it's all kind of other things going on background that we don't know about. But so I wasn't happy with that. And then during COVID was when I discovered about Gestalt language processing, and I learned more about sensory differences. We learned about our sensory differences, especially my husband, his dad, and so we hired a private speech therapist. We did ABA through Zoom. It wasn't really helping. But we did have an amazing BCBA, I have to say, after she was just willing to listen and be curious about Gestalt language processing. And I shared information with her. This was right after COVID. But anyway, yeah. And then I've been learning more about his sensory differences. And he's such a sensory boy. We really have to take into account those sensory differences, not just in speech. We still have private speech every week, as well as in school. But also during ABA, like we have another BCBA now, she's good. And she communicates with the speech therapist. And she really tries, you can tell she's like trying to keep him active and moving because he's very into his movement during therapy. So she's doing her best and I appreciate that. But yeah, he's such a sensory boy and we all have our sessions outside because he's very well regulated outside. But yeah, we have lots of sensory tools and accommodations for him at home. And we're lucky his school also is a good district and they listen. And I feel like during the IEP meetings that they really think through and try accommodate him to the best they can. So
that's wonderful.
So far, yeah.
That's great. What was your first like introduction to sensory, or that was even a thing? Because I personally, as an OT and having been on an autism assessment team, I feel like that should come hand in hand at that assessment. Like there should be information for families about their child's sensory processing. And I have seen so many evaluations where they'll have sent home one of the sensory rating scales, whether it's a sensory profile or the sensory processing measure. Yes. And it just says your child does this more or less than other kids. And there's no explanation of that for families. And that is, for me as an OT and with a sensory background, that's such valuable information for the quality of your everyday life. It impacts so much and it drives me crazy. That isn't part of that welcome package or kit that you should get as parents. So how did you start? Was it your own investigation? Did somebody kind of tip you off to it? How did you start to figure out and uncover Joe's sensory processing stuff?
Like I mentioned, with the lights was the big thing. I thought, okay, he just loves staring at the lights. And he used to stay at a mom's house when I was working, when he was like less than 1. And she used to say he was crying and I just turned the light on and he stopped crying. And he was such a happy baby. And I thought, interesting. And then with the noise too, I have a hearing sensitivity too, but his is like upper scale. So there's certain sounds that I know are just like painful to him. And now the appliances too, with some of the appliances in our kitchen. So it was those 2 things mostly. I don't know. I still don't know about his smell. And that's a tough one. So when they asked me the sensory profile, I've only had one of those, by the way, and I think it should be given like every year. But with the sensory profile, I just wasn't sure. I just don't think he's very sensitive to smell. And the tactile even, it doesn't, tags and things like that don't seem to bother him. He does like pressure, like we say, face massage, like he likes pressure on his face, pressure on his feet because he doesn't like wearing shoes outside and things like that. So he's got that. And then, visual, like with the lights so much. And then, of course, I think he has some, it's hard to tell with taste as well. They prefer the more the beigey foods, the bland taste, that kind of thing. So it was that. And also my husband, we realized, had sensory processing differences because he likes dimmer lights. He cannot stand me chewing next to him. I discovered this after. And then he has an amazing sense of taste. Like he can taste flavors in food, like when he's cooking or when we're cooking and things. I'm like, I don't taste that. And his smell is very good too. But it's like those big differences,
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah.
And now, once you understand them because of your child, you're more empathetic and there's differences now with your extended family members too. Like we look at our family members, like my brother, I think he's Asperger's, etc., things like that. So it's interesting, but the sensory, it's amazing. That's one of the first things, like you said, we should really look into. So yeah, it was mostly through our own, it's just a difference between him and his sister. And then his younger brother also, when he came, big difference there, like over some active, hypersensitive and under to other things.
Yeah. And it sounds like those internal senses as well, like the vestibular, needing that lots of movement to regulate, and the body awareness, the proprioceptive piece, needing that pressure and those joint contractions and movements.
Oh, yes. He has a swivel chair. Yes.
Yeah, nice. And then talk about how was like the interoception piece? How well does he recognize his own feelings, and how was potty training? Was he picking up on those internal cues, or was that another area that was challenging?
I think that was at the time. We potty trained him during COVID. He was 4. I just thought he was ready, but I had difficulty. I had no support. I didn't know how to get him to sit long enough in the toilet to do something. And I did all those things. There's just not enough resources out there. No. Maybe better now, and there's just not enough resources out. So I tried my best, and then I resorted to get ABA tried to help, but it was COVID and it wasn't happening. Yeah. So I resorted to getting a private potty consultant, and she was able to just get it done. She came for 3 days from out of state, and we just had her come, and I just continued what she did. And it was a slow progress, and regressions happen. But number 1, we were able to do quicker than number 2. And number 2 took a period of maybe a year or so. Okay. And even now, he still wants me. And I also feel a little bit like I still want to go with him. But he's closing the door now, and I stand outside, which is good. It's more of a hygiene issue. But yeah, with the interception, I think it happened at the time because I feel like a lot of the kids, especially by the time they reach 10, majority of them will be potty trained. It's just a delay because of that interception delay. He had amazing control, which is not always a good thing, like bladder control. So he would hold himself until if he's not comfortable, he'll go outside maybe and do number 1, rather than in the bathroom, in the toilet. But the interoception with feelings, we are working on that now, and with no pressure. So that's the main thing we're working on with, like, I'm sad, I'm angry. And he's actually himself, it's interesting. He has a few favorite apps on his iPad. And he's recently been reading a story about a boy that's scared and afraid. That's just by himself. So I think he's putting it together. And we've been working on likes and dislikes. I like, this is hard for him, but it's slowly we're doing it. We're using also his talker, because it seems like with the I like and I dislike, I do not like, it's easier for him to use his AAC device than say it right now. So I think he does that on his AAC earlier than he's able to say it, speak it. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I have several children that I'm working with, their families, and there's the praxis component where it's that motor control and that output. And we're finding language is coming through AAC much faster than it is verbally. And sometimes parents are like, should I be encouraging this, or should I be pushing for more verbalization because they have some speech language abilities? And I, as an OT, I'm not an expert in speech. I'm not an expert in AAC device or Gestalt languaging. I'm learning, but I think our kids show us a lot of what they need. We just have to learn how to pick up those cues.
Yes.
The AAC device for Joe, is predictable. He knows how to make it work. It makes it easy. When you add in that motor component of trying to formulate speech and trying to put the words together, I have to have the idea in my brain of what I want, and then I have to be able to formulate that. And the consistency of that coming out is a little bit more of a complex process than being able to just click into your iPad in the same place or your communication device. And so I think our kids show us a lot of what works for them. But if we don't have that lens to see that and understand how they're processing things, then we miss some of those cues,
presume competence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I forget so many times. I'm like, resume competence. And at the moment you forget. And then my husband's like making fun of me. He's, you have to resume competence. Look, he did it by himself while you were away. He mostly stays with me, but sometimes like I take the other to taekwondo. So it's a good time for him to bond with him. And he did this by himself and he cleaned up. He resumed competence. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. But we're busy. And as moms, we want to just get everything done. And I know I'm partly to blame as well. So we have to stay on top of that. But the thing you're saying about the oral, like the muscles, I know with him, also like blowing candles, like on a birthday cake, we were just able to achieve this last year, but it's not a consistent thing. So I know it's those muscles, right, are very fine, like it's tiny.
So if we talk about like gross motor muscle movements, like moving your arms, moving your legs, walking, jumping, skipping, that's big muscle groups, lots of sensory feedback.
Yes.
Then we go to fine motor. So then we're looking at handwriting. We're looking at like arts and crafts activities. That tactile piece gets involved there. That is a fine motor. And then we go to eyes, which are super fine motor. So this can be something where we see with kids, especially in the school. I often get referrals as an OT in the school-based setting because kids can't track. So we're noticing reading and writing are really hard. And it can, if the fine motor piece, the motor development is there for the hands, but it's not for the eyes. If we think about how much we're asking kids to read left to right across the page or shift from at the desk to up to the board where the teacher is to whatever she's demonstrating, those are all muscle movements, right? And then we think about oral motor. So speech is a motor activity. It is a muscle-based activity where we have breath control, we're moving our tongue and our cheeks and all of those muscles in a certain way in order to create sounds. And if he's not getting adequate enough feedback, then consistently being able to produce the sounds the way he wants them to come out and remember the muscle pattern to coordinate that can be really challenging. And if you can eliminate that part, like for some of my kids with dyspraxia or apraxia, when we're working on handwriting, I shift them to typing so much easier because you're not having to remember the letter formation every single time. I have to remember the letter and how to spell this word. Now I have to remember how to write each individual letter. Does it start at the top? Does it start at the bottom? Is it a big letter? Is it a short letter? Does it go left to right or right to left? And if we have all those things, it starts to become this really monumental task. So when we eliminate that motor component, we can access much more of their expressive language easier while we can continue to build that motor development and that coordination, but at a different pace so that we aren't using that as a barrier to seeing what language they actually understand and that competence. And it's really cool because sometimes it opens up when we take out that motor piece, that barrier that sometimes presents when those things are, when they're learning at different paces. So they understand a lot of language, but the motor piece to produce the language, whether written or verbally, isn't at the same level. So there's that discrepancy. When we eliminate that motor piece or remove that barrier, so when we're using assistive devices like voice to text or using an C device, then all of a sudden we see this bloom of language come out that was always there. We just couldn't access it before. So it's really cool when we look at what is going on, where is starting at that base of sensory processing and how they're understanding things and then meeting them where they're at and figuring out how competent they actually are. It's really cool to see. And also realizing too, we all have fluctuating capacity, even though we think every day should be good and should be moving upward and onward. We have fluctuating capacity, especially when we have sleep issues or we have illness or we have nutritional deficits or things that are going on, or even just change in seasons or change in classroom, change in routine. Those things all impact. If you have a child who's more sensitive, of course, they're going to be more sensitive to these other things. Having this generic expectation of it's always going to get better is something where we set ourselves up and our kids up for failure, I think, a little bit too harshly. And I think that there's a lot of guilt on behalf of moms. Like you said, it's easy to, like, we have to do all of these things in a day and not giving the space to let our kids show that competency. Because sometimes what I've noticed with a lot of families, and myself as well in my own family, is not very many people have a lot of margin, right?
Yes.
Our plates are so full, our
Exactly.
demands are so high
Yes. Yeah.
that it's hard to have the space and the buffer or the margin to see those competencies, because
Yes.
we have to get to the next thing. We have to get to school. We have to get to this.
Yes.
And it's hard. It's really hard to fight against that and to slow down. It's been something that we've been working on here in our household, to just constantly, what can I take off my plate? What can we reduce? What can we do less of? So we have more margin. But it feels like you're swimming upstream.
It is. Yeah, but it's hard, especially nowadays with our generation of parenting. And then we have our neurodivergent kids, or if you're neurodivergent yourself as a parent, again, it goes back to the whole co-regulation, right? You have to be regulated for yourself first, and then you can help regulate with your child. But yeah, I explained that very well. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. It's something we talk about a lot. So I think, at least I talk about with my clients that I work with a lot, and I feel like it needs to be more in the mainstream conversation, because I think sometimes we have unrealistic expectations on ourselves as moms of neurodivergent children, that we should just keep progressing and we should keep meeting these milestones. And that timeline looks different.
Unfortunately, I think part of that comes from society, or some of society that looks down on neurodivergent, or negative way, neurodivergent individuals, and they're not meeting the milestones and they'll never learn, they'll never get better. I think that doesn't help. And it's like, sometimes you want to show them, right? Or prove as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very challenging. So what resources or tools were most helpful for you in understanding about the sensory system?
Let me see. So when I started the Instagram account, there was a few accounts on Instagram that actually I learned from. I had an amazing occupational therapist at Joe's school.
Oh, good.
Who now left. She's moved out of state to be closer to family, but she was very supportive. And she on Instagram also used to see the things I did. And then she used to also recommend like some accounts on there. So it was mostly honestly online. Let's see, it was mostly Gestalt language processing. I feel like Gestalt language processing indirectly, I learned about it. And then that's where I learned more about sensory processing differences, because a child cannot pick up a gestalt that you're trying to model for them, especially if they're in stage 1, unless obviously connection first, and then they're well regulated too. And then you have to learn about regulation. There's also emotional regulation, but most of it is sensory. I know with Joe too, which is why we have the sessions outside all the time. So yeah, it was mostly through just online Instagram accounts. And then his occupational therapist, she always came up with ideas to help him, especially with fine motor. And then providing in his IP, we made adjustments to that. We have certain sensory tools for him, similar to home. It's very similar, actually. They're like, he has his peanut ball there. They have a swivel chair for him. He has all his chew toys, different types of therapy balls. They have a sensory gym now open there and next to his class. So we have a new OT, and she's good too. But yeah, his first occupational therapist was amazing. And I've tried other OTs through our insurance, and they were very going by, we're going to do this first. I'm going to do this. And then there's, and sit at the table and let's play with our play. Let's do our Play-Doh, which he puts in his mouth. So that wasn't going to work. He has to have a motivation if we're going to practice fine motor. Sure. So he loves his clementines, for example. And one of the things his ABA actually did, which was nice, let's get him to peel his clementines. And he will do it because he's motivated to do that. Or let's take the sticker off the clementines. He doesn't like the sticker on there, and he'll do it. We used to practice meaningless, here, take the sticker, put it on this paper. It meant nothing to him.
Yeah.
And that was so much time I spent. And even cutting with the scissors. He does not like cutting. He's thinking probably, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the motivation part is important too.
So much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I'm glad that you were able to advocate for that. It's something that I have seen, and it's it was something that I really struggled with as a new OT of this doesn't feel like it fits for this student, or it doesn't even feel good to me doing this. Something isn't right here. And
it's not natural. Yeah.
yeah, I really, the rote practice was not something that I really struggled with. And at the time, I didn't even know that I was neurodivergent. So now it makes sense coming complete circle.
Yes.
But so tell us a little bit about your book. Your book is just beautiful, and I want people to know about it. So tell me a little bit what led to that and where we can find that book.
Thank you. So my first book, Up You Go, Joe, that was produced before this one.
Okay.
And I had the idea for that one in 2020 because I suffered a stillbirth. And so that kind of triggered something, and I just came up with the idea. And then at the same time as that one, I was writing that one, I wrote like half of Joe's special gifts. I just wanted to do something like rhyming, inspired by Joe, of course. And I had spent so much with our kids during COVID. We were so close to them. We were like their teachers and their therapists at that time. And I just saw how much he loved music and outer space. And so I produced the first book. And then the second book, I wanted to be a children's autism book, a book that celebrates neurodiversity, a book that shows the common autistic traits based on my personal experience of what Joe, from his perspective, as I think from his perspective. And so I did half of the book, and then the following year, I just did the other half and put it together. And I wanted it to be a fun rhyming book. And with the first book, I didn't have any experience of being a self-published author. So I just went with a kind of a publishing company. You pay them money and they find you illustrator, editor, designer, and they get it ready for you. A lot of money. With the second one, I knew more of what to do, tried to do more of an independent kind of way of publishing. And I had more knowledge about illustrators, and I knew what kind of style I wanted it to be, a bright, happy, whimsical kind of illustrations. And so I found my illustrator through Instagram. I loved her work. And so after editing, I found the editor through another author. And then I found the illustrator through Instagram. I connected with her. And so it took a bit of time, maybe a year and a half till everything was done at that time. And I was fine with it. I didn't have a deadline or anything. And we did make some changes as I knew more about neurodiversity, neuroaffirming language. For example, when I first read the book, I wrote, I have autism. And so I changed it to I am autistic. And we were still able to keep the meters, the rhyming meters the same. Anyway, so yeah, it took a while, but it helped, as I said, with doing some more editing. And so, yeah, we just produced it, did the design. I published it through Amazon and Ingram Spark, and just took more of a role in it. And I feel like that's what happens in life. Like you learn, right? And now looking back at my first book, I'm proud of it, but I wish there was some things I could have done, and I could have spoken to the illustrator and be like, maybe we should have changed this or this at that time, but that's okay. Yeah, I'm proud of the book, and just as a way, at least kids will spark conversation about autism. Oh, what does it mean to be neurodivergent, and why is he doing that, and spinning this, and even I tried to make it a happy book. There is that page about him having, like, with the change in the routine and things like that, but you have to show facts, and it's to do with the way his brain is thinks with the child cognitive processing. And yeah, so.
No, I love it. We love it. It's a favorite in our household, and it is so cheerful. And children's books are such wonderful gateways to have some of those conversations where we don't know as parents, how do I bring this up? Or how do we start talking about this? Or how do I even know how my child is thinking about this or processing this? And sometimes books can be such a wonderful way to see, how are they thinking? What are they saying? What are the comments that they're making when you go through a book? And so it's so helpful. So I'm so grateful for you for that.
Thank you. And illustrator is neurodivergent too, I think. I think she has ADHD, but her daughter definitely is autistic too, and it's mentioned in the end.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that was interesting. We just didn't know that until she didn't know, and then she knew.
Yeah. It's fun, the connectedness of the community that's coming. So lastly, before we wrap up here, one thing that I ask almost every guest is, if you could give encouragement to a mom who is fairly new on this journey, who feels like she's drinking from a fire hydrant of information right now. There's so much learning that's going on, and trying to figure out what is most important to my child or going to help us. Maybe she's struggling with burnout or really big behaviors and not knowing what's going on. And she's trying to figure out, she's learning, she's researching, she's trying to, what support works for us? Does ABA work? Does speech work? How do I pick and choose the things that are actually going to help my child and not, we want to see what are their competencies, not go compliance based. What would you say to a mom in that place right now? What advice would you give her?
So parents know so much, and I would trust your instinct. If you suspect something and then a physician or a therapist says, let's wait and see, and I don't think so, go for a second opinion. Don't be afraid to take that leap, because I did that and lots of us did that. And we waited. Speech therapy, OT, anything, but especially with speech and with ABA too. If you suspect the therapist, no, this is not helping, it's wasting time, my child is just not, if he's not looking forward to the session, if he's not asking for that therapist, it's something is up there. Look at the language too that they use. So we were actually, our ABA vendor, we had a few switches. Was taken over by another one, which was not good. The language, you can just tell from the documents we had to do. And a lot of parents complained. And I think because so many parents complained, they ended up discharging the parents and the patients, the clients. And I ended up going, a lot of BCBAs were not happy. And they also left and formed their own ABA, which is what we're with now with Joe. And so far, so good. It's just BCBAs coming out too. So look at the language, make sure they're truly neuro-affirming and they know what that means. So it's okay to ask them, like, do you know what neurodivergent, what it means? What do you know, like what compliance-based therapy is? So trust your instinct as a parent and then inquire about neuro-affirming practices. A lot of the time, look at how your child is doing during the session. It's a big clue. Like Joe asks for his therapist. Is she going to come? Is she going to do this? Not directly questions, but he's not at that point of questions. But he will be sure, okay, she's coming. And you can tell it lights his face up. Yeah. Speech therapist, and even the ABA, the BCBA, because she tries to mimic what the other one does. So yeah.
That's so great. I'm so glad that you've formed a really good, solid team for Joe. It takes a while to do that. I think sometimes we think that therapists are going to be a good match and they're going to know more. And the truth is that parents are the experts of their kids. They really are. And I think when we can find somebody to collaborate with and who has some of that, like for me, the OT and sensory background, working together with the parent for what they're seeing every day. Because even if I'm working with a child one-on-one, an hour a week, that's still a very small amount of time to their whole day. And what they look like first thing in the morning to the middle of the day, to the end of the day, and bedtime routines. I don't get to see that. You have to find somebody who's willing to work with you and collaborate with you and learn from you and be curious about your child just as much. And I think that's a huge piece and really encouraging that you do get to advocate for.
Yeah. And also I feel like the parent might be themselves neurodivergent, or at least have some traits, and there's some link there that they understand what their child is going through. Yeah. So you're just more understanding and think, okay, what should we do now about that? Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you. And I love this conversation. You. And you said your book is on Amazon, right? That's where people can find it. Yeah. Perfect. All right. We'll put a link in the show notes so people can get to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you and seeing you again. And thank you for all the information you shared. It was very useful.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome.
That's it for this week's episode of The Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you loved this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you.